Hello, everyone. It's Phil Jones, and I am at ARAD with Michael Greco, and we're here talking about the Definitive Technology Dymension series of loudspeakers. So, Mike, how are you?
Doing great. Doing great.
So, let's talk a little bit about the speaker and the target customer and use cases.
Well, let's just step back a little bit for those that aren't as familiar with Definitive Technology and its Bipolar series as maybe you and I are, right? So Definitive Technology has been around since 1990, right? And the founder always wanted to provide a unique and differentiated experience to that consumer, hence the name Definitive Technology. And so what we're going to talk about today is Dymension, which is the next generation in bipolar loudspeakers from Definitive Technology. So this will completely replace the current BP9000 series that we have in the marketplace today. And when we went about designing and building this new line, we didn't want to just do a lot of little kind of incremental things. We wanted to really understand what was working well, what wasn't working well, and we wanted to also improve upon the total experience. And so the new line, as Scott talked about, is ground up development. So, there's, and we touched every aspect of it, whether it was the tweeter, the mid-range, the woofers, the built-in subs, and then we also expanded the assortment so it would work in more people's homes. Because when the original 9000 series came out in 2016, Atmos was just starting out, and home theaters was just kind of on the rise. And so we've learned a lot since then. So we wanted to build a new definitive line that would bring that home theater experience to the next level. Now, not to say it's not great for two-channel music listening, but this is, in my opinion, the ultimate. If you're a home theater enthusiast, this is the speaker system for you.
The return to bipolar.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
So traditional speakers have a set of drivers on the front. They just radiate, so they're monopoles. What makes the Definitive Dymension series unique, as well as its predecessors, was that they are a bipolar speaker, meaning that they have a driver array on the front and they have a driver array on the rear. And what that does is that puts more energy into the room, and obviously it will reflect off the back wall, and it gives you this very spacious and a lot of ambience. It gives you, oftentimes people will talk about it as if you're in a large theater like an IMAX. You definitely can feel the difference between that versus being in a small little cinema, or maybe you're at a concert or outdoor concert hall, or even in a club. So it gives you that ambience, but it does it in a way that just makes everything feel bigger. It feels more, you're like more immersive. We use the word immersive a lot, but in this case, it's not just marketing hyperbole. It's like you feel like you're in the center of it because of that experience. And so what we did with Dymension was we have the drivers that you see on the front, well, you can't because they're covered by a grill cloth, match those on the back. And we call that either a symmetrical or a balanced bipolar array, meaning that we have mid-tweeter mid, mid-tweeter mid on the back. So you have the same amount of energy that's going out the front is going out the back. And that's what gives you that experience. One of the things that we did differently in this series versus its predecessor was the predecessor did not have a symmetrical or a balanced bipolar array. It had just a mid and a tweeter. So now by mid, tweeter, mid, they're symmetrical. But we understand there are certain circumstances when you might want to turn that down a little bit. So one of the things we've done is we've given you the ability to attenuate the tweeter. So there's a little switch on the back that allow you to knock the tweeter down by 6 dB. And the reason you might want to do that is you might have it really close to the wall. So you don't want as much energy going into the wall because it's really close to the wall. Also, just personal taste. As you know, there's lots of speakers out there, lots of speaker brands, and there is no right or wrong answer. And so, to me, it's all about what is your personal preference and personal taste. And so, one of the things that we've done with this line is we've given you some tools to customize the sound to your taste, while at the same time, we also didn't want this to turn into a Lego set where you have to build it yourself. And so if you're a tweaker, you're going to have some fun with it. But if you want something that works right out of the box, we've got you set there as well.
So let's talk a little bit about the lineup.
Okay.
Starting from the big floor standard. By the way, Mike mentioned you normally don't get a chance to see within behind the curtain, but if you look here, we actually have a DM80 without the stock on it, so you can kind of see all of the stuff is in there. So this is the biggest of the floor standards, correct?
Correct. So in this line, we have 4 floor standers. we have 3 center channels, and then we have 2 different height modules. One is designed to sit on top of the speaker as a topper, and I've got an example of that right here. Very clean design. One of the things that makes this really unique is you'll notice that there is a connector on the bottom. So you literally just set it in on top, and that's it. There's no ponytail hanging off the back. No,
Clean.
it's very clean. On the back of the, so all the wiring is internal, and then there's a pair of binding posts on the back that you would then connect to your AVR.
Your speaker just gets a little taller, and it adds more capability. So that allows you to either to expand your system in the future, or gives you, if you can't put speakers in the ceiling. And
We have another, so that's the model for that's called the DM90. We have another model called the DM95. And what that is, that's an on-wall solution to the problem. So if you have a situation where you have vaulted ceilings, you have open beam ceilings, or maybe your ceilings are really tall, because remember what you're doing here is you're reflecting sound off the ceiling, and you want it to ideally land in the listening position, not land somewhere else in the room. And so if your room isn't conducive to that, then we have on-wall solutions for you as well. So again, and that's new. We didn't have those before. So again, when I talk about, we wanted to make the line more accessible to more people. We wanted to make it so it so that it would fit more home environments. And so that's a clear example of where you have now the flexibility, because you can mix and match this stuff. You could have toppers on your fronts, and maybe on your rears you have something on wall, or you want to even use these as side surrounds if you needed to do that. So you have a lot of flexibility now where you might not have had that before.
Okay, so we have like the DM80, and then you said there was 4 other models. As I go down, the next one is a DM70, right?
Correct.
So what's the difference between those 2 speakers?
So we have so the DM80, DM70, and DM60 are think of it as like, extra large, large, medium, for lack of a better thing. As you step down, there's 2 things that will happen. They get smaller in size, but what's really separates this line from almost all other loudspeakers out there is we have built-in active subwoofers. And we haven't talked about that. So for example, with the DM80, we have a 12-inch active subwoofer, roughly 400 watts, with dual bass radiators, 12-inch bass radiators. And as you step down, you get a 10-inch woofer with dual 10-inch bass radiators, and then you go to the 60, you get an 8-inch woofer with 8-inch bass radiators. And so what we're trying to do is depending on your room size, depending on your configuration, again, we want to give you a lot of different options from a model standpoint. The 70 and the 80 feature 5.25-inch BDSS mid-range drivers.
Mid-basses,
right? And they all feature the new aluminum oxide tweeter. The 60, we moved to a 4.5-inch. So part of also that means that you get a little bit narrower profile. So maybe you have a situation where you want something that's a little bit more narrow in profile and has, because for aesthetics or just driven by space. The other thing that's nice about these towers is that when you build in the sub, you don't have another box on the floor, right? So there's a couple of benefits to this. So with the built-in subs. One is that if you think about it, if I have 4 of these towers, it doesn't matter the size, I now have 4 subwoofers in my room. So I can distribute that bass much more evenly throughout my entire listening space without actually adding a whole bunch of black boxes. And the cable runs that you're going to make, remember, because it's just, you're going to plug into your mains.
Yeah, that's 4 subwoofer cables you have to deal with, and 4 boxes you're going to have to deal with.
Right, and so you're going to set these as large in your AVR, and you're going to run that signal to it, and you don't have to then have the additional cable runs. The only thing you have extra that you wouldn't have in a passive speaker is because these are active, you do have to have an electrical cord that you plug into your mains. But most people can accommodate that because most of these things are they're not too far from outlets. So you get a huge amount of benefit. You get an acoustic benefit from the fact that you have 4 subwoofers in a room. Takes up less space, so significant others and people like that might really appreciate the fact that you don't have another black box in the room.
Exactly.
Maybe your pets maybe you appreciate you don't have to protect it from your pets. And then the last part that's really important, and I don't know if Scott touched on this, but because we control the whole system, we get to control the blending. We talked about customization, where you can customize, you can turn the tweeter down if you're too close to the wall. In the case of the subwoofers, we have what's called intelligent bass control, and it's a knob on the back that basically allows you to turn up and turn down the bass. And when you turn it up, what we want to make sure is you don't get something that doesn't sound good. So what we can do is we actually dynamically, depending on where you set it, we know what the optimal settings are for blending to ensure that you get the very best bass. And so again, you can customize this to your personal preferences and to your room. So it's the built-in subs is not just a space-saving place, but it's also offers a lot of acoustic performance.
So you said that you have as you turn the intelligent bass control up, it kind of changes. It ensures that the subwoofers remain blended. How do you do?
Well, it not only ensures remain blended, but if you looked at a frequency response, what you'll notice is that we're not adding a whole bunch of energy to the lower mid-range, right? So you might get chesty, or it might sound. It might not sound as natural as you want. So the whole idea is to still keep it sounding natural. But you want to hear, I want to hear more of that kick drum, or I want to hear more of the explosions, right? Because the speakers aren't known for huge dynamic range. When you actually compare this speaker to our friendly competitors, you can hear the pin drop, but you can hear the explosion, and you have it across this huge frequency response. And if you want to get more of that, you can absolutely do that. So on the back, you'll see there's a knob that's called intelligent bass control. And the reason it's intelligent bass control, and it's not just like a volume knob that you'd have on a subwoofer or a gain on a subwoofer, is that for each indent, we've gone in and used the DSP to optimally tune where it's actually set. So we ensure that you're getting the best listening experience at the bass level that you have set.
That's a lot more work to do that. Most people would have just given you more volume. They wouldn't have taken the time to ensure that at every step on that knob, it's optimized for that step on that knob.
So when we talk about, we touched every aspect of the speaker, and we just didn't want to make incremental improvements. We wanted to dramatically improve the experience, right? That's another example, because the predecessor had intelligent bass control. And it was good. People loved it, and we've got a lot of accolades for it. But we're like, we weren't satisfied with it, right? And so we said, what can we do better? How can we make it better? And so this is an example of just another thing that we went in and spent the time and energy to make it better. And it's all about giving you that differentiated or definitive experience. And you can absolutely hear that. If you turn it all the way down and turn it all the way up, you'll absolutely hear the difference. And even small changes. The default is noon, but you set it to 2 o'clock, you're going to hear a difference. And again, it's all about personal taste. It's not about your room. It's not about what's right and wrong.
The other thing too that I noticed is the cosmetic. I like the look of the the previous generation, but I think this generation with the more matte finishes kind of blend in a little bit better. Because when I first saw this speaker, it appears more discreet, and even though it's a big speaker, it doesn't overtake your room and command more attention than what you may want it to command.
Right, you can see, so this has aluminum trim, and it's more this anodized dark aluminum trim, and this is the trim that's throughout. It's hard to see on this one because we took the stock off, but you can, but the feet, and then there's a trim piece that goes through the metal almost like a belt, and then the top plate, it all uses this anodized aluminum. And we did that intentionally. One is that when you're in a home theater, especially now that projectors are so common, right? You don't want a lot of reflective light off of these speakers. So we wanted them to look elegant. We wanted them to be relatively neutral for most decor. But more importantly, again, if the whole thing is about having an amazing home theater experience, the last thing is you want a bunch of reflected light coming back at you from the screen, because it takes you out of that suspension of disbelief, right? It's like you're constantly annoyed by that reflection. And so we wanted to make sure that was absolutely something that we thought about in the aesthetic. But at the same time, we just didn't want to cover it in a black grill cloth and say, okay, we're done. There's also some design to it as well, because again, this is something that everybody sees, and so it's furniture, and it needs to fit the part.
Okay, so you have your 4 floor standards. Now, there's one in the model. Was one model?
The one model I didn't talk about was the DM40, and it's the first time we've done a passive model. And we did a passive model because there were certain circumstances and use cases where a passive model was desired, and it features 4.5-inch mid-bass driver, so it's still a balanced or symmetrical bipolar array. It's very small form factor, so it fits in a lot of different circumstances. It's very easy to power. It's also fairly inexpensive as well. So there's a lot of different situations where you can apply that. You can use it as for 2-channel listening, makes a great pair of stereo floor standards, or you can use it to support as a surround your home theater. And so that's the first time we've done that as well.
And that's the only one that's ported as well, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, so we have the floor standards. We've already talked about the different height options. Now, last but not least, 3 center channels, right?
3 center channels. So what we did in our previous was we kind of went, small, medium, large. We stepped back and we started looking at how people were using these things, and we were like, what can we do to help these? How can we help the consumer? So rather than just doing kind of like small, medium, large, we started thinking about use cases, right? So the obvious first one was, I want to have the ultimate home theater. So we have a center called the DM30, and it is
a beast.
It's a beast. It's a small child. It features 4 5.25-inch drivers. It has an 8-inch active sub built in with a bass radiator. Everybody we've demoed it to has just been blown away.
Yeah, it outperforms most people's full size floor standing speakers, and it's the center channel.
Right. Now we still recommend you roll it off at like 60 hertz, but you're rolling off the center at 60 hertz, right? So it's it is an amazing piece of kit, and anybody that's into home theater. It's funny because the center channel is always kind of like the last thing people buy, and it's the last people think of. But it's one of the most important pieces of one of the most important speakers in your system. And so if you have the space for it, and it's definitely well worth it. Once you move out of that, you start to think, okay, how else can we help folks get a great home theater experience? So when you started thinking about it, some folks don't have anything below their TV. They don't have a credenza, they don't have an AV cabinet, they don't have anything. So one of the things that we've done is we've built a wall mountable center channel. So this is the DM20, and you can see on the back it's got large metal keyhole slots. And what this can be used for is not only as your center channel, but it can also be used as an LCR. And so this is for that person that really, they want that center channel because they know how important it is, but they just don't have space for it. And so this allows them to put it there. The other thing is that in a lot of households, if they have a fireplace, a lot of people mount their TV above their fireplace. And the fireplace mantle is usually about 6 inches deep. If you look at it, we've actually designed this
to fit,
so it'll fit. So this can go in places where a traditional center channel can't go. And so we're very excited about this. And I think this is going to definitely expand, give a lot of options to folks out there that want to have a center channel but just don't have the space for it.
And I like the fact you said LCR. So we talk about that application thing. So you may even decide you want to use the towers for the front,
right?
The height, the on-wall heights, and maybe that as your rear surround speakers if you decided to.
You could go with 5 of these. You could go with 3 up front and do something in the back. You can use these in a lot of different places. The other thing is I was looking for the little logo badge. This logo badge is magnetized. So if you want to rotate this 90 degrees, you can rotate the D 90 degrees so you don't have the whole thing of, why is your D?
Why is your speaker mounted sideways, right? It looks like that's what it was planned for. But that's another example of attention to detail.
Right.
Okay, now there's one more.
There's one more. And so one of the things that we noticed, and this was shame on us, was that we make a lot of center channels that don't fit in AV cabinets. And so if you buy an AV cabinet, you have that little cubby hole, that little shelf that's designed actually to hold a center channel. So we went out and we measured. We got the measurements for large of the most popular cabinets, and we designed the DM10, which is the smallest of the center channels, to fit in that space. And because it uses PRs, thank you. You don't have to worry about port noise. You don't have to worry about chuffing. You don't have to worry about those things. But the idea is it now fits in that cabinet, so you don't have to think, okay, where am I going to put this? Because if your TV was sitting on top of the cabinet, it's now blocking the TV. Also, your significant other doesn't want another black box sitting somewhere. So if you think about it, it's an application piece. Just like this, as an application piece for wall mounting, you now have something that can go in a cabinet. Nothing says you have to do that. You can easily just put it on the credenza, and maybe you have your TV wall mounted above it. But it is a small form factor center. It will keep up with the towers, and it's again, it allows more people to get that center channel experience and to get that home theater experience. It just makes it more accessible for more people. So that's what we talked about at the beginning, where we wanted to really grow the line in a way where it would work in more people's homes. And you've seen that now with the 2 different height modules, with the 3 different center channels, and obviously with the 4 different size floor standing speakers.
Yeah. So a really good lineup. Scott talked about in detail as well as you about all the new technologies that are built into these things. The performance is great. I've heard them here and in our office in San Diego, and I've been incredibly impressed. So I think anybody who has heard even the older versions are going to be pleasantly surprised at the performance of the new models.
Super excited because this is
the flagship. This is kind of the flagship of the brand
for DT, absolutely. It's well, like I said, we shipped the BP9000, and I believe it was 2016, so it's well overdue. It's been a fantastic product line for us, and lots of people got a lot of great enjoyment out of it. So we think this one, the next generation, it's going to continue its legacy, and a lot of people are going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it.
And like we mentioned, nothing sounds like a Definitive Technology Dymension. It's not going to, whether you're a customer on a showroom floor or you're a salesperson presenting these to people, they sound different, and you will notice that the first time you have a chance to demonstrate them or you hear them compared to other speakers. The spaciousness of it, the impact of the bass, the dynamics, it's just a different thing. So how did Scott say bigger, bolder,
more chips,
more
chocolate chips in your cookies? Yeah. So I think that when you and I go to our friend's house and families, and we and they're or they come to your house and they listen to something, right? They always talk about a couple things. They talk about especially if you have a multi-channel setup, sound comes from everywhere, right? And obviously we're both, we have access to lots of subwoofers, so lots of bass, right? But at the end of the day, also imaging is really important, and immersion is really important, and that's what these speakers kind of bring to you. And the beauty of it is that you don't have to be an audiophile to experience that. You don't have to be an expert. These speakers are very forgiving in terms of how they're set up and they're placed. And they give you all of those things. I sat in multiple demos the last couple of days, and I was in the back rows and the front row, and where I was sitting, I had an amazing experience. In terms of just that immersion that I would get, and the bass, and then the imaging. Like I said, the imaging is it's big. It's just big, but it's not smeared, and it's not and it's also fun. So so if you're and like I said, we watched multi-channel music tracks. We watched King Kong versus Godzilla. So we watched a lot of different things, and it's fun. I think that's what this is all about. It's just having fun in your home theater, whether it's music or it's movies, and again, we wanted to make this not intimidating, right? So it's like you can go home and you can do this, and you can have an amazing experience with not necessarily having to be an expert at this point. There's you can see it in the background, but you'll notice that these speakers are basically barely towed in; they're straight on. So it's not like, oh, I gotta tow this in, put my seat here, lock my head device, and do this. You don't, and so you have the L-shaped couch in your family room. You're going to have a good listening experience where you're sitting in an L-shaped couch, right? So I think I'm super excited about it, as you can tell, just because I know that if they give them a shot, they try them, they're going to experience something they can't experience with other speakers. And I think, and not only that, but because of the built-in subs and how forgiving these things are, they're going to be able to get exactly what they want out of them with not too much effort. Yeah,
and like I said, we were playing with them for a couple of hours today, and it just makes you want to go back into your catalog and say, wow, what does this sound like? Right. What does that sound like? Right. It's really a different way.
How many people did we show clips of movies and like, I got to go watch this movie?
Yeah,
right. And they haven't seen the movie, and so we showed them. From your staff, right, your team, and they're like, how many people they raise their hand? I got to go watch that movie again, or I now want to see that for the first time. And that's the power of a good pair of speakers, right? Is that it totally complements what they're seeing on the screen and sucks you in. So now we're like, we actually had a situation like, can you let it go a little longer? I want to see what happens, right? And so but that's the power of good speakers.
Yeah, the whole thing is just to immerse you and engage you in that experience. And I think that Scott and the whole team at ARAD did an outstanding job developing these models. So Mike, thank you for hanging out and talking to us about the new Dymension speaker lineup. So, like I said, please take an opportunity to check them out when you have the opportunity, and I'm sure you will be quite impressed with what you hear. So take care, everyone, and we will talk to you soon.